Hello there. Hi there. Please welcome Helen Mirren.
Thank you very much.
Hi there. And how did you all like Trumbo? Yeah? All right.
Oh, comfy seats in the front. Fantastic.
We know you like Trumbo because you gave her 3 SAG nominations for
Yes.
the ensemble
you.
of the movie, for a supporting role of Hedda Hopper, and also for her other great movie this year, Woman in Gold, as lead actress. So
Yes, very appreciated.
that's nice, right? To
Fantastic.
dominate the
Fantastic.
SAG Awards like that.
We'll see on the night, you know. It might be a completely different story, probably will be. But no, that's really wonderful. I was particularly touched that Woman in Gold got recognised because, as you all know, when your work comes out at the beginning of the year, when it comes around to this time of the year, often those movies get forgotten about. So I was particularly appreciative of that one.
Yeah,
really.
because that opened April 1st. And
Absolutely. And,
usually no movies are remembered, in the awards season, or at least that's the thinking. No. And that one obviously was by SAG. So that's
yes, it's very. Someone was suggesting to me last night, which I thought was actually rather a good idea, that in the Academy Awards, at least, that one of the films that are nominated for Best Film has to be a film that was released before in the first 6 months of the year.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm sure I'm aware as an audience, the kinds of movies you want to see are very thin on the ground for most of the year, and suddenly at the end of the year there's you could go every night. There's so many movies are released because obviously there's a certain kind of movie that is pitched towards the Academy Awards, and that's the kind of movie that the whole awards season helps. So it means that because there are so many of the movies released like that, it's hard for them to to make money, whereas Woman in Gold did very, very well financially in the cinema because it was released at a time when not so many, for want of a better word, adult films. Actually, I'm rather famous for doing adult films, aren't I?
But we know what you mean.
You know what I mean.
Smart, intelligent movies.
Yeah.
Of which Trumbo, I think, is really one, too. And, to get to play Hedda, who I totally remember Hedda Hopper, but I never realized, I guess I didn't remember how evil she could be.
She did call her house the house that fear built. Yeah. So, she had a recognition of her own power to make or break people in the film business. And she wielded it quite ruthlessly, I think. Of course, she didn't see herself as evil. I'm sure she saw herself, and I think she was a great patriot of America. She loved America. She loved what, in her mind, America stood for, freedom, individuality, and all the rest of it. She'd be a classic sort of Tea Party person. She's but she's an authentic American voice, really. But it's just a lesson in what a delicate balance the issue of free speech is.
And it really is, it so resonates when you see this picture to things we're seeing happening today. It's almost like we haven't learned a whole lot since then in some ways, because we're seeing this kind of McCarthyism creep back into society here.
Yes. Obviously, very, very different times now, and different fears that are abroad in the public. There was a great fear in that era of communism. Of course, it was absurd. America was never going to become communist. Never. Stalinist, Bolshevik communism. It was ridiculous. And they almost threw out the free speech. They almost threw free speech out of the window which is a very slippery slope to go down.
To think that DaltonTrumbo and others went to jail.
Went to the jail. I
mean,
know.
that's the astounding thing.
Yeah, it is astounding. I knew quite a lot about the issue before I came to the movie, because it had fascinated me in the past, and I knew about Hedda Hopper. I hadn't quite understood that people had gone to jail over it. That I knew they'd lost their jobs, and of course, us in Britain, when I was growing up, we were the beneficiaries because we got two great directors. Joseph Losey, came to work in England, and there was another great director whose name eludes me for a minute, who came to work in.
Didn't Hedda Hopper actually be responsible for getting rid of Charlie Chaplin?
Oh, very much so. Absolutely. She relentlessly campaigned against him until eventually he had to leave America and went to live in Switzerland. Yes. And on her the day she died, she said, "At least we got rid of Charlie Chaplin."
It's that kind of power for a columnist is on. I don't think there's anybody that you can quite say has that level of power.
And nowhere near. 36 million people read her, avidly. And it was very interesting because, as far as I understand it, she was brought into position because Llewellyn Parsons had in that position had gained too much power, and the studios were getting nervous of how much power Llewellyn had. So I think they brought in Hedda as a sort of competition to sort of weaken Llewellyn's position. But the result was that then the power all passed into Hedda's hands.
Wow. Now, to play Hedda Hopper, what kind of research did you do just into her? Obviously, it has to be a really fun role to play. I mean, just the costumes and the hats.
Absolutely. And, this is a real character, isn't it? It's a real full-on character that you can kind of get your teeth into. And there was surprisingly little film actually on her, although she had televised when she got into television quite early and sort of televised her column, if you like. But there was not a lot of ordinary sort of footage of her, surprisingly little. I read the book that her son wrote. Her son wrote a book about her. And I obviously tried to investigate her as much as I could to sort of, the film isn't about Hedda Hopper, so I can't bring all the colours in that one would have liked to have, but it was important to understand with a person like that really where she's coming from, I think.
Did you have empathy, or do you have to have empathy for a character before you play? Or you got to find something in there that's obviously more than one dimension?
No, I don't think you have to have empathy as such. You just have to see the world from their perspective, and try to understand it, and try to understand why and how. There was a lot. Speaking as a woman, purely as a woman, there was a lot of admirable in Hedda Hopper. She did create her own. She carved out her own career. She was a self-made woman. She was fierce, and she was successful and bold and brave in many ways. So, as a woman, I had to sort of respect that. And I think also, as I say, it was very important to put her historically where she was and understand that the vast majority of America thought the same way that she did at that time.
It's interesting. I love the scene with some of the actors, John Wayne.
Yes,
I love that.
Isn't he wonderful?
Yeah,
so good. I absolutely all our boys playing those iconic roles, I thought were fantastic.
Kirk Douglas.
What a challenge! So so terrifying to play. Bad enough to sort of have to play Hedda Hopper, but to have to play Kirk Douglas, like terrifying. And I thought they were so good. They were really wonderful.
I think he's from New Zealand.
Yeah. Yes. Really.
Yeah. But that was good, that thing, and I kept wanting more of Hedda Hopper in this movie because I wanted to see what she really would do with John Wayne. Give her, a few more scenes against him because she'd probably win, actually. But
she backs down, but she just threatens him a little there. I love that. Yeah, the great.
What you
John
did so
Wayne.
great in this movie, you got across even though it's a supporting role, you were really, it was three-dimensional. You really did understand her, and at the end you saw her alone, and those scenes I thought were kind of touching, actually, to watch her.
Yes, I very much wanted the last shot of her to be her naked, not physically, but psychologically, and no makeup, and not the hat, and not that image, just this sort of naked person. Because she played a role. She played the role of Hedda Hopper to a certain extent, and those extraordinary hats and everything were her costume, the costume of the role that she played. And I thought it was important at the end to see her outside of that role of Hedda Hopper, and just as a slightly frightened and someone who feels like she's lost.
Is there a difference when you play a real-life person, such as Hedda Hopper or Maria Altman in Woman in Gold, that you have a different sort of responsibility as an actor in your mind, or does that make any difference between that or fictional characters?
Oh, no, it makes a huge difference. No, absolutely, because especially if the character is within living memory of people around you, you have to pay attention to the physicality and the sound and. All of those things are very, very important. I don't actually look anything like Maria Altman. She had a far more aristocratic face than I have. But obviously hair and voice and accent and all of that sort of stuff you pay attention to. And of course, the advantage of playing a real life person is that you do have a person with an amazing backstory. It's all there for you. You don't have to invent it. You just have to look it up and read about it and try and inveigle your way into that person and the insides of their thought processes. And try and live it. Once you've got the outside going, then you have to live it from the inside out as an actor. And that's, I think, incredibly important when you're playing a real life person. I can't, I'm sure you actors understand what I'm saying. I can't quite articulate it properly, but obviously, as I say, you get the accent and the hair and the walk and all of that, but that's one thing. Now you have to live it from the inside, and you have to really think about the thought process. For example, with Maria Altman, I had to put her memories into my mind, her terrible, terrible memories of what happened to her and her family, and what happened when the Nazis walked into Vienna. And to do that, I had to. I read a lot of Holocaust material and history to really be able to visualize, and in every scene, I felt I needed to carry the pain and the memory of that. Didn't matter whether I was making a joke or whatever you were doing, the pain and the memory of that had to be there all the time. So I think that's also important, playing real life characters, that you don't get too caught up in the exterior of it, although the exterior is important.
Before I've got some questions from the audience, but Bryan Cranston, how great is he in
Fantastic,
this movie?
Yes. Oh my God, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, what an amazing life and career as an actor Bryan has had and is having. To think of going from Malcolm in the Middle. I mean, he was brilliant in Malcolm in the Middle, wasn't he? As his frenetic dad, he was so brilliant. And then, of course, to Breaking Bad, and that extraordinary character that he developed and played over all that time. And then I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to see him in LBJ on stage. He was incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. And now to Trumbo. So, I just a wonderful career as an actor, that it's all happening for him in the second half of his career.
I know, it's amazing, but he's the nicest guy,
and
too.
he's the nicest man, absolutely.
Yeah. Had you not worked with him before? Or?
No, I worked with him briefly. My husband had always been a great admirer of Bryan's, very much.
Taylor Hackford,
those who don't know. Yes. And he'd cast him in a film that we did called Love Ranch, and Bryan had a small role in it because it was before Breaking Bad. And he was fantastic, you know. And we just had one scene together. Yeah.
Well, now we have some questions that they did before you saw the movie, but Deborah Ashida, where are you? Oh, there you are. That's you. Okay, your question. I've got it right here.
Oh, fellow Brit, jolly good.
A fellow Brit. Oh, nice. Okay. Are you enjoying the biz, in quotes, just as much now as when you started?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. You know, it's changed so much for me. When I started my career, I was a very, very, very idealistic and dedicated theatre actress. And that was what I wanted to be. And I wasn't really interested in film, quite honestly. The British film industry was terrible in those days. It was just awful. If I wanted to work in film, I wanted to be a French film actress or an Italian film actress, but you know, that was impossible. So I wasn't really, you know, interested in film, but I was very, very dedicated to theatre, and I spent the first 6 or 7 years of my life, maybe more, doing theatre very consistently. And then I sort of realized that there was this whole other world of acting, the world of acting on screen that I knew nothing about. I was complete and utter, you know, beginner in that world. And so I thought, well, I guess I'd better start learning about that. Now, you know, as you know, the only way to learn is to do it, isn't it? And hope that you get a role, and you just the thing of walking on set and walking over the, you know, where is the set, you know? You know, where is it? And who are all these people, you know? I know, it's all a bit weird. So one of my first films was John Borman's film about King Arthur, you know, Excalibur. And that was one of my very, very first. I'd done a couple of films before that, but that was pretty early. And poor John, he had me, he had Liam Neeson, who'd never, ever done a movie before. He had Gabriel Byrne, who'd never done a movie before. You know, we were all complete amateurs. You know, he was trying to tell us what to do. And we were. So I felt very sorry for him in retrospect. But you can only learn by doing it, really.
Was Age of Consent with James Mason one of the first ones?
That was my very first film.
Because I see they're putting the whole thing out, a big anniversary edition
on Blu-ray
now.
Embarrassing. Oh my God.
Yeah, I saw it advertised the other day.
Oh no. Oh no, really? Oh, you see, it's terrible. You can't escape film. That's the thing.
Now, once you do them,
you know, theatre goes away. No one remembers. They just remember it with rose-coloured glasses, you know. But film, oh no, it's all out there.
That's funny. Is there one film that you made that you would like to just like make it magically disappear?
Lots and lots of those.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. No, that's not true. Actually, that's not true. And even Age of Consent, which is sort of, James Mason has the worst Australian accent you will ever hear in your life. Mine is actually quite good, but his is terrible, absolutely terrible. It's funny, but he was a gentleman. He was very kind. Yeah.
All right. Laura Carson, where are you? Right there. Hi. Which types of roles do you find the most challenging, and do you seek them out, or do they find their way to you somehow?
In general, they seem to find their way to me. People often say, what would you like to do? And I can never answer that question, because actually the most interesting roles are the ones that you didn't know anything about and come out of left field. You know, Maria Altman. That story had completely escaped me, and there is a wonderful character and a wonderful role and a great story. But you know, you want obviously complex roles. I've always said, you know, a role that is strong through its complexity. In other words, strong through the weaknesses in the character. You know, it's always the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses and the faults in a character that makes it an interesting character to play. So you look for that. I think that's why very often real life characters are so interesting to play, because we are all flawed, and somehow writers are never quite capable of creating that kind of interesting, surprising, random, weird sort of things. I always say truth is so much more interesting than fiction, and it always is, isn't it? It's just much more complex. So often, especially in film, you know, the characters, especially the female characters, are there to serve the plot, you know, as more than anything else, really just there to sort of serve the story and help the male character along, you know, and rather than a real sort of full character of their own.
You know, I saw a movie you have opening March 11th at the Toronto Festival just before it was sold, called Eye in the Sky.
Yes.
Now that character, that's an extraordinary character for anybody, actor or actress. I thought the one you played there.
It's a great character. I mean, funnily enough, I just said, but the character does very much serve the story in that, and of course, it's a wonderful character to play. But in that film, which I hope you will enjoy when you see it and when it gets released here next year. No, this year, later this year. It's the story that is sort of so remarkable, and what's the word? You know, just it grabs you, doesn't it?
It really does.
Mm.
It's an amazing
Yeah.
story dealing with drones.
Yeah,
And
it's about drone warfare.
check that out, because it's dealing with the moral compass of all of that.
Yes,
and
yeah.
like I've never seen.
Yeah.
Like really good
Yes.
movie. Now we have Michael. Which Michael? There's no last name.
There's a Michael.
Do you remember writing this question, Michael? Okay. It is, how have you navigated a career between film, TV, and theater? And how do you transition so easily between the different mediums for which you have won Oscars, Emmys, and Tonys?
I always try and make sure, all my whole career, if you look at, you know, what I've done year by year, once I got over my first thing, 10 years of just doing theatre, and started learning about film and really loving film, and that happened actually through doing Prime Suspect, and that sort of long time of doing that TV series. I learnt so much. That's when I really learnt about filmmaking, was in that. And then I started really loving it. But I realized that if I didn't go back to the theatre, I'd lose in England we say you lose your bottle and glass arse. It means you'll lose your, you know. Anyway, you lose your bottle, which means you lose your courage to do theatre, because theatre it's terrifying, you know. And so about every 4 years, I would religiously go back to the theatre, which I've done all my life, actually. So I've always made sure that I've never let theatre go long enough to not have the courage to go back and do it again, or the energy.
Of course, most recently, doing The Queen again in the audience,
Yes.
and for which you won a Tony, and you played
Yeah.
in London as well.
Mm.
Are you going to do another theatrical thing coming up? Are you going back?
I'm talking about going to the Roundabout at the end of this year, at the Roundabout in New York, to do a play. I'm thinking about it right now. I just can't quite, you know, get myself convinced to commit, because, you know, it's terrifying. Once you're committed, you're on the conveyor belt, relentlessly going towards that first night, even though it's 9 months away, and it's just such a frightening proposition. I get so nervous.
Diana Hart says, how do you develop a character, in this case a real-life person, without doing just an impersonation, which is a really good question, actually. And then what inspires you?
Well, I think that, you know, I addressed that question to a certain extent earlier on, about the necessity to get the outside of a character right, but then to travel inside of that character and see the world through their eyes. And hopefully that's what lifts the characterization out of, you know, an impersonation as such. It's very interesting, isn't it, that the difference between what is an impersonation, and you see brilliant impersonations, absolutely brilliant. I was very interested to see that Tracy Ullman is coming back. I mean, and what an amazing impersonator Tracy is. Really extraordinary. But it is impersonation. It's not an acted performance. It's funny that, how to define the difference, but there is a really big difference between the two.
I was just talking, not to name drop, but I was just interviewing Michael Fassbender not long ago, and he was talking about this and how he didn't want to do Steve Jobs because he said, I don't look like Steve Jobs, I don't do anything. And Danny Boyle, his director, said, I don't want you to. I want you to get the essence.
Oh,
of the
absolutely.
character."
And he does, doesn't he? And in doing that, he looks like Steve Jobs. Right. And actually, I found the same with Bryan doing LBJ. He didn't. There was no big makeup-y thing or anything. He just inhabited it, and in inhabiting it, him looked like him. It was amazing. And when he came on for the curtain call, because he wasn't inhabiting him anymore, he looked like Bryan. He didn't look like LBJ anymore, and nothing was different, costume or wig or hair or anything. It was a great acting lesson in a way.
Amazing. And if you didn't see it on Broadway, he did it for HBO. It's going to be on in
yes,
May.
which is great. Yeah, we'll all have the opportunity.
Can't wait for
to
that.
See it, yeah.
Let me see this one. This is Seth Bloom, and in the film, your character, based, of course, on a real woman, is fairly unsympathetic as an actress. What process do you go through to find any self-love? Well, you sort of talked about this too, our camaraderie with your character.
Yes, I think even if you really don't like where this person has finished up, I think it's important to chart their process there. And I have a theory about Hedda Hopper, which is that I have a feeling that maybe, I think when she first came to New York, I think it was New York she first came as an actress, I think she had a really hard time negotiating sexual abuse or sexual harassment or whatever you want to call it. In other words, being hit on by guys when she was a vulnerable, out-of-work actress kind of situation. In that era, much more extreme than it is now, but probably, going through the kinds of things that now we're hearing stories of what women used to go through. And I suspect Hedda went through that. And I think it built up a real anger in her and a resentment. And I think I wonder even if there hadn't been some sort of abuse of her as a child. I don't like to say that it's too facile, but she had a weird she married a man who was much older than she was, but at the same time, she had an absolute hatred of men abusing young girls. That's why she hated Charlie Chaplin so ferociously. Not only was he a lefty, but she felt he was a paedophile as well. He did like young women, he did. And he married, Una. How old was Una Chaplin? She was very, very young, 20, and he was like 60 by then. So, she had a point in a way. But it was almost something, unbalanced about her feeling about that. And I was very interested I would have loved to have rummaged around more in her past to see. So that's the kind of thing that you have to sort of think, why? Who is this? Why is this person like this? Why? Where's it coming from? What's in the background there? Oh, and you become like a sort of little private little detective,
It's cool. They gave me the signal, but I only have one more, so I'll do it, and then we'll let you go. But Lisa Ross asks, sometimes it can be very difficult to be seen for projects if you are not a name, in quotes. What advice can you give for keeping the faith? Thank you. All hail the Queen.
Well, hi there. Hi. Yes, you're so right, Lisa. It's what a difficult profession we have, really. But I'm really, and here we are, we SAG members here. But I'm very, very much against this equity initiative to close down the small theatres in Los Angeles. It's because I'm a great union person. I believe in unions. I don't, I think that workers should be protected and, and people shouldn't be abused. But at the same time, to speak to your point, there is this wonderful network of small theatres in Los Angeles that do some fantastic work. And the only way to get to be seen if you don't have a name is by doing it somewhere that people can come and see you, in it. And I think it does work, it's the only way. So I think we should all fight to keep those theatres open, and for people in this city, actors, to have a venue that they can practice, that they can show their work, and be cast out of.
Absolutely. Thank you, Helen Mirren. Amazing
Thank
as
you.
always.
Thank you
so
very much.